You were loyal, you gave yourself completely, you believed that by offering your truth, your dedication, and your presence, that would be enough to keep her by your side. And yet, she left. Her silence cut deeper than any words could have. What remained was not only the absence of a woman, but the suffocating sense that your very identity had been ripped away with her. That is the weight of a breakup. It does not only destroy the relationship, it threatens the way you see yourself as a man. Every ending feels, at first, like a sentence on your worth. You ask yourself what was missing, what was not enough, why she could not see what you believed you were offering with body and soul. But the breakup, when seen through the lens of deep psychology, is more than an external rejection, it is an internal mirror. It reveals hidden dependencies, exposes wounds you carried long before her, and uncovers the fragility of your masculine foundation. This is where many men lose themselves. They confuse the loss of the woman with the loss of themselves. Jung once said that the shadow is what we reject in ourselves and that, inevitably, it manifests through our relationships. And that is exactly where the truth lies. The pain of the breakup is not simply her abandonment, but the brutal encounter with your own shadow, the neediness, the fear of loneliness, the craving for constant approval. The breakup merely shines a light on what you preferred to keep in the dark. And as devastating as this may seem, it is precisely in this confrontation that the possibility of reconstruction is born. There is a detail most men never notice. While you are chasing her, trying to fill the emptiness with presence and messages, what you are truly trying to recover is not her body, but the image of yourself that existed within that relationship. You do not just miss her, you miss the version of yourself you believed in while she was around. That is the real wound, the identity that collapses when her desire no longer validates your existence. But there is a turning point, a moment when pain ceases to be just a burden and becomes revelation. Because every breakup, no matter how cruel, is a silent initiation. It did not come to diminish you, but to force you to abandon the illusion that your strength depends on the gaze of a woman. The emptiness you feel today is not just loss, it is space. And space, when understood, is the first fertile ground upon which something new can be born within you. This introduction is not about forgetting or replacing. It is about looking at the wound and seeing that it was not the end, but the beginning of a transformation. You did not lose everything. You only lost what was being held up by a fragile foundation. What remains now is the chance to build something that no one can take away. Because true healing does not begin when she returns, but when you realize you no longer need her to exist. The hidden wound, when the breakup is not about her, but about your very identity. The breakup does not only destroy the relationship, it strikes directly at your sense of self. You believed you were losing a woman, but in truth, what disappeared was the version of yourself that was upheld by her gaze. When she left, she did not just take away memories, she took the mirror in which you recognized yourself as a man. That is why the pain feels unbearable. It is not the absence of her body. It is the emptiness of not knowing who you are, without the validation that once came from that relationship. This is the silent fear that many men carry yet rarely admit, the fear of never being enough. It manifests as that inner voice constantly asking what was missing, what could have been done differently, where you failed to meet her expectations. That voice is the true prison. For as long as you believe her love is the proof of your worth, every rejection sounds like a definitive sentence of inferiority. The confusion deepens when you try to separate what belonged to her and what belonged to you. Losing a woman should not mean losing yourself, yet in practice that is exactly what happens when your identity is too entangled with the relationship. You were not simply in a love story. You were dependent on the image of manhood that she projected onto you. When that collapses, you are left with the sense that nothing remains. This is why so many men spiral into despair. Endless messages, desperate attempts to win back someone who is already gone. Deep down, you are not trying to recover her, you are trying to recover yourself. Emotional dependency remains invisible until a breakup violently exposes it. Before, it looked like devotion. You even prided yourself on being ever available, always ready, always giving. But under the harsh light of separation, you begin to see you were not offering love, you were offering submission in exchange for validation. This is the shock many men face when the relationship ends. They realize they were not loving as free men, but begging for attention as emotional captives. Neuroscience shows that the human brain reacts to breakups in the same way it reacts to addiction. The very areas activated during drug withdrawal light up when you lose someone you were emotionally dependent on. This explains the desperation, the anxiety that does not fade, the obsessive checking of social media, the craving for any sign. It is not simply longing, it is withdrawal. Your nervous system had been conditioned to believe safety only existed when she was near. And here lies the shift. This collapse did not come to destroy you, but to reveal where your foundations were weak. The breakup forces you to see that you can no longer outsource your identity to the gaze of a woman, that you are not defined by her desire, her approval, or her presence. This shock, though brutal, is the chance to begin again at a deeper level, where your identity can no longer be taken away by anyone. When the wound bleeds, the instinct is to close it quickly with distractions, new relationships, or frantic attempts to reverse the loss. But true healing begins only when you face the emptiness head-on and realize what you lost was not her, but the part of yourself that believed you needed her in order to exist. This is the moment to rebuild your masculinity, not as a reflection of the female gaze, but as a presence that exists by itself. The breakup strips away masks, destroys illusions, and shows who you really are when there is no one left to validate your existence. If you accept this calling, the pain ceases to be only a wound and becomes revelation. The identity that crumbles is the very one that must die for a new one to be born, stronger, freer, unshakable. Because once you discover you do not need anyone to confirm who you are, you become free. The cruel mirror, why she left, and what it truly says about your hidden worth. When she left, what remained within you was not simply a sense of loss, but the corrosive poison of rejection. The masculine mind translates her departure as a verdict. I was not enough. That is the hidden trigger of inferiority. You start to compare yourself with other men, to imagine that they had something you lacked. Yet the truth is that rejection itself was never about your essence. It merely reflected the insecurities you were already carrying, which suddenly erupted with brutal force. The effect is devastating because it strikes at something deeper than the end of a relationship. It is the sensation of being invisible to feminine desire, the moment you realize that your presence was no longer needed. This erasure wounds more than physical absence. It attacks the quiet pride of being wanted. A man who is no longer seen by the woman he loves feels as though his masculinity has been amputated. And yet, you must understand that this mirror does not reveal who you are. It only reveals how you are hiding behind an identity built on fear and fragility. The female unconscious perceives what you will not admit to yourself. She may never put it into words, but she senses when your energy is rooted in neediness. Her rejection was not a condemnation of your worth, but an unconscious response to the reflection of your own insecurity. This does not make her cruel in intention, but cruel in effect. She merely reacted to the frequency you were emanating. While you were seeking approval, while you were living to meet expectations, while you avoided conflict in fear of losing ground, what you were truly transmitting was a lack of center, a lack of roots, a lack of yourself. That is why so many men are confused by phrases such as, "It's not you, it's me." On the conscious level, she may even believe it, but psychologically and energetically, the truth is different. She was first attracted to what appeared to be solid in you, and with time, she realized that this solidity was only a facade. Her unconscious felt your insecurity, even when you tried to mask it with effort, devotion, or even excessive generosity. She did not walk away from a lack of love. She walked away from the instability hidden beneath your presence as a man. This is the paradox of the cruel mirror. You look at it and assume the reflection is a judgment on your value, when in fact it is simply a reflection of your inner fractures. It does not show you what you are not, but what you have not yet dared to become. The pain, therefore, is not proof that you were discarded. It is the revelation that there are still parts of you that are not aligned with your deepest masculine essence. Here lies the strategic point. When you stop interpreting rejection as a sentence and start seeing it as revelation, the inner game changes. Because what you once believed was the end, her departure, was in fact the opportunity to see with clarity what you had been hiding from yourself. It was not the absence of love that ended the story. It was the reflection of an insecurity that, unless faced, would undermine any relationship. Once this understanding takes root, the mirror ceases to be cruel and becomes necessary. You begin to see that the breakup did not declare you unworthy. It only declared that it was time for the version of you that depended on her gaze to die. And that is the moment when pain begins to transform into strength. The ritual of silence, absence as emotional surgery that reconstructs your strength. The immediate instinct after a breakup is to fill the void with movement. You want to call, send messages, explain yourself, prove that you are still present. That impulse is born of fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of losing any chance of return, fear of becoming irrelevant. Yet, it is precisely here that the key to reconstruction lies. Silence, what at first feels like abandonment, is in truth the emotional surgery that removes illusions and returns a man to his center. Scarcity holds a psychological power that few men grasp. When you withdraw, when you stop offering constant attention, the emptiness you leave is not only a space in her life, it is also a space within you, a space that must be inhabited by your own presence. That absence, which initially feels like weakness, is in fact an exercise in inner power. For while you remain silent, her body and mind are forced to face the lack. And more importantly, you are forced to confront your own emotional dependency without the anesthetic of constant pursuit. Silence is an invitation to rebirth. It functions like a strategic incision. It breaks the compulsive cycle of begging for attention and opens the path to rebuild your masculine energy. Neuroscience shows that when you stop chasing external stimuli that fuel your reward system, such as messages, replies, or signs of validation, your brain begins a process of reorganization. This reorganization is painful, because the addiction to her presence still pulses. Yet it is precisely through this abstinence that new neural connections are forged, creating an identity that is more stable and less dependent. There is a paradox that silence reveals. While you once believed persistence would make her remember you, the real effect was the opposite. The more you pursued, the more invisible you became. Desire does not thrive in abundance, but in lack. It is absence that awakens instinct, that stirs thought, that ignites memory. When you choose silence, something shifts. She realizes the control is no longer hers, and at the same time, you realize that you no longer need to chase in order to prove your worth. Silence is magnetic because it breaks the unconscious pattern of pursuit that drains any relationship. It shows, without words, that you are no longer guided by fear of losing her. This stance radiates an energy that needs no explanation. The man who does not beg becomes naturally intriguing, because he places himself beyond immediate reach. This is not a game. It is inner reconfiguration. It is the end of the need to please and the beginning of silent sovereignty. By choosing silence, you are not merely stepping away from her, you are drawing closer to yourself. The absence that once felt like punishment becomes fertile ground. Each day without contact is an opportunity to rebuild, to train self-control, to realize that the world does not collapse simply because she has not replied. In that space, you breathe again as a whole man, not as a fragment in need. The ritual of silence is not revenge. It is not manipulation. It is emotional discipline. It is the act of withdrawal, not because you have given up, but because you understand that your energy cannot be squandered in begging. That retreat creates a new narrative, the narrative of the man who does not need to pursue, because he knows his presence is already enough. And when that truth settles, absence ceases to be pain and becomes power. The hidden reversal, the day you stop begging for love and start becoming the reward. The most common mistake men make after a breakup is to believe they must win her back, prove themselves, persuade her. You beg for attention. You seek signs of acceptance. You act as if every reply from her were oxygen. Yet as long as you are asking, as long as you place yourself in the position of needing to be chosen, you are sending a clear message. You still do not see yourself as enough. The true turning point comes when you stop seeking approval and start being the presence any woman would be fortunate to be chosen by. This movement is almost invisible, but it is powerful. Women test men unconsciously. They watch how far you are willing to destabilize yourself for scraps of emotion. Every silence from her, every refusal to respond, every distance created is not merely neglect. It is a hidden test to measure whether you remain whole or whether you collapse in her absence. Until now, you did not notice. You believed insistence was proof of love, when in fact, it was confirmation that your center was weak. Reversal takes place the moment you stop begging. Not because you have given up on her, but because you have understood that no man who respects himself asks for what should be given freely. When you invert the game and place your validation within yourself, the entire dynamic changes. What was once pursuit becomes presence. What was once desperation becomes magnetism. What was once dependency becomes freedom. This awakening is a silent reprogramming. You move from the energetic field of neediness to the frequency of sovereignty. Behavioral psychology calls this a shift in locus of control. You cease to depend on external factors and take responsibility internally for your own worth. That is why, when you reposition yourself, she notices. Not because you announced it, but because your energy no longer pleads. You are no longer competing for attention. You have become the prize. And at that point, something unexpected happens. Her gaze changes. For feminine attraction has never been activated by submission, but by masculine presence that cannot be manipulated. When she senses that you are no longer chasing, no longer begging, no longer crumbling in the face of absence, her unconscious recognizes the difference. The insecure man has died, and in his place stands someone who no longer needs to plead for love. The paradox is clear. When you stop asking, she begins to offer. When you cease to beg, she begins to miss you. When you no longer pursue, she starts to perceive the value that was once hidden. Not because you played a cheap trick, but because your energy shifted from scarcity to abundance. The true prize is never handed out. It simply exists, and those who recognize it act before they lose it. This reversal does not mean becoming dismissive, nor cold or indifferent. It simply means repositioning yourself. You are no longer the man who must prove himself. You are the man who is, and once that truth settles, it becomes visible in every gesture, every silence, every choice. You are no longer the one asking to be chosen. She is the one who realizes that if she fails to see the worth before her, it is she who will be left outside. Rediscovered masculine strength. What the breakup reveals about your capacity for desire and leadership. The pain of a breakup is also a rite of passage. Masculinity, in its essence, has never been forged in comfort, but in the crossing of losses. When a woman leaves, what remains is the clearest proof that you can endure the unbearable and still rise again. That shock, which at first feels like ruin, in truth reveals your capacity to lead yourself, to direct your energy beyond the need to be accepted. It is in the silence of loss that true masculine strength awakens. Loss shows that desire does not depend on external response, but on the flame you keep burning within. Many men believe their potency is directly tied to feminine recognition. When she no longer desires them, they feel as though their virility has been extinguished. Yet emotional neuroscience tells us something different. Masculine desire is a flow of vital energy born in the body and shaped by the mind. It can be paralyzed by rejection, but it can also be redirected. Pain, in this sense, is the catalyst that forces you to assume control of your energy. This experience works as initiation because it confronts you with a choice: to remain in the role of the victim or to rise as the leader of your own life. Leadership here is not about commanding or controlling others, but about governing yourself, refusing to be enslaved by the need for acceptance. When you reposition yourself in this way, your energy changes tone. You cease to be the man who asks, and you become the man who offers direction. And direction is the foundation of attraction. A woman feels it when a man knows where he is going, even in the midst of chaos. That is why many men report that, after a breakup, once they truly rebuilt themselves, they became unrecognizable even to their former partners. Her gaze shifts because she no longer sees the needy man who once begged, but someone who discovered his strength in the abyss. It is not uncommon for such women to attempt to return, drawn to the magnetism of a man who no longer needs them. Yet the crucial detail is this: by then, you are no longer the same. Even if she comes back, you cannot return to who you were. The breakup, then, is not the end of your story, but the beginning of a chapter in which you uncover the potency that was always dormant. Pain is the trial by fire that separates the man who loses himself from the man who awakens to his true masculinity. And once this awakening occurs, there is no way back. You become a leader not because she returned, but because you learnt to exist without anyone to confirm your worth. Every breakup is both a cruel mirror and a hidden opportunity. It exposes the dependency you denied, tears away the masks you sustained, and shows that your identity was being molded by her gaze. The pain you feel is not only about the absence of a woman, it is about the confrontation with the part of yourself that believed you could not exist without approval. This is the hidden wound which, once recognized, becomes a portal to reconstruction. Silence, which once seemed like punishment, proved itself to be surgery. It revealed that constant presence does not generate attraction, but rather scarcity, the absence that reignites desire and, more importantly, restores your command over your own energy. The hidden reversal took place the day you stopped begging for love and began to be the reward. From that point, need was replaced by presence, desperation by magnetism, dependency by freedom. Rediscovered masculinity is not born when she returns, but when you realize you no longer need her in order to exist. Loss unveiled your strength to desire and to lead, not to control others, but to govern yourself. And when a man governs himself, no breakup can crush him, for he is no longer trapped by the reflection outside. He lives from the inside out, anchored in his own vital energy. This path is not easy, but it is transformative. With every layer of pain, you uncover a layer of strength. With every emptiness, you find space to build something solid. And at last, you see that what you interpreted as rejection was life itself, stripping away what was fragile so you could erect what is true. This is the essence of masculine awakening: to lose, only to discover that nothing was ever missing, except the awareness of who you truly are. Now the choice stands before you: to remain chained to the narrative that you were rejected and are not enough, or to step into the passage and become the man who does not beg, does not depend, does not bend. Life is not asking you to forget. It is asking you to awaken. For the wound did not come to destroy you, but to reveal you. And when you finally understand this, the breakup ceases to be an end and becomes the beginning of your true strength.